Cash Color Campus, a high level of conversation on livehipHopDaily.tv. This is our last live recording of the year. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. For those who are here, those who are new, this is Cash Color Cannabis. Again, this is a high level of conversation where we blend cannabis culture with pop culture. We've had everybody from the likes of Kwanzaa Hall, Senator Vincent Force, to Freeway Ricky Ross here to have conversations with us about everything from cannabis culture to pop culture to what's going on in their lives. So for everybody who's here tonight, I want y'all, if you are using social media, hashtag Cash Color Cannabis. Also, hashtag Scott's Yard Dinner Series. Shout out to my man, Chef Scott Leanis over there cooking up some good food for us tonight. So this is going to be an amazing night. I want to get to my interview as quick as possible so everybody can get to eating and get out this cold, man. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my man, Melek Dexter. Melek, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm cold, and yourself?
I'm doing great, man.
I'm cold, and yourself?
Well, I'm not cold no more, man. I've been running around these streets all day, so I was half freezing. People swear, because I'm from Boston. The first thing they say is you should be able to deal with cold, but I'm like, I grew up not liking colds. You feel me? Like It's all good. I came to the South to avoid the cold. But I had a good chance to speak with you last week. We got a chop up down at the gathering spot, so I got a chance to get to know a lot of the things that you're doing with your organization, ReUp. So I thought I'd love to introduce you to our crowd and our audience for our last episode of the year. So without further ado, man, state your name and tell us what you do.
All right, my name is Melek Dexter. Excuse me, the African in me is resisting the cold, so get my voice together. But what do I do? I stay up late at night trying to figure out how we should be free, and we're not. So I put that into a program called ReUp. And just to give a little background is that I have an older brother, and I think everybody kind of thinks that their older sibling is larger than life. Yeah. And one day my older brother developed a scar. We found out he had a scar on his brain about an inch long. And so we were told that the seizures he had would ultimately kill him. So I had a little change from, working as a computer programmer. And so I decided to go to California looking for this thing that I heard, which was this oil, derived from THC that could assist. Yeah. So, being from the South, I'm very familiar with, those home remedies that do what they do. Yeah. That are bigger than just the rumor. So I had the opportunity to see something that I wish, more of us could see. I found in Northern California, I connected with an Asian guy, and he took me to Humboldt. And I saw white people who had appropriated what they call a hippie cultural consciousness, culture, and had moved it to Humboldt. And there was a unique thing about it is that there was a great appropriation of a crop that we all were very familiar with, and that was marijuana. Everybody from the mayor, the sheriff, it was the thing in that area.
Oh, Humboldt County, yeah.
Humboldt, yeah. The Emerald Triangle. So while I was there, I moved around and I noticed it was even the black people I saw there, it was a strange situation. It was almost like being in the Twilight Zone where the people didn't want to make eye contact because they didn't want to mess up their connect. Yeah. So don't let this other black guy up in here and mess this thing up, So I hadn't obviously passed the test yet. So while I was there, I brought some change, so I purchased, and I'm a businessman as well. So I brought, this oil back, and my older brother, used it. Now, my older brother smoked weed all his life, but obviously it hadn't, assisted that situation. But in the day that he took that, he didn't have any more seizures. So I was sold, and so then I continued my pursuits to the Emerald Triangle. And over time, I realized there was a stark difference, that I was buying and selling weed, and they were buying and selling marijuana, cannabis.
We spoke about the difference last week. Yeah.
And so, I was in the game and they were in the business. Yeah. And so I didn't want to be, the thinking man's drug dealer, and I knew this wasn't going to end well for me. So I came up with an idea because I said there has to be more, brothers and sisters like myself who we don't fit the drug dealer stereotype. And so whatever that is, So from there, I just graduated the situation into an idea where I said, legalization was on the way. So I wanted to create something that would allow us to be able to get in. And so I came up with ReUp at that point. So I submitted it to the #1 incubator school in the country called Y Combinator.
Yeah.
And they loved the idea. They waived the fees. I was able to get in. And upon getting in, we went through the coursework. And after the coursework, you get the opportunity to be invested in by the VCs. So we didn't go that route. We went the route of, because I really believe that we as a people could do it. So specifically what ReUp does is that we aggregate the funds of ordinary folks, individuals who have a net worth less than $1 million and earn less than $250,000 a year. And those individuals could invest and pool their money and actually buy into cannabis. Yep. And so I like to say we figured out a way to get us in on a crop that they won't share.
That's interesting. Yeah, we had part of that conversation last week. You said the difference between what you were doing and what you noticed other people were doing, and the stark difference of that. Now, was that your first experience with cannabis? Prior to that, I know you said your brother smoked most of his life, but prior to that?
It was in my backyard growing. I would just act like I didn't see what my older brother was back there doing. And I know he wasn't back there with tulips and nothing like that. Yes. So, So yeah, it was always around, but it was dope. Yeah. So you didn't mess with it if you were a good kid.
Yeah. Now with ReUp, you have there's several activations that you're serious about when and 4 of them are competitive differentiators, being vertical integration in new markets. Those are 3 of them. Speak to us about those and why those were some important things that you felt like you wanted to tackle with ReUp immediately.
Well, prior to, it's considered the legacy market instead of the black market. So everything that led up to legalization, we have to consider that you look at the concept of hidden figures. Because we were hidden, it doesn't mean that there wasn't a certain type of acumen relative. Yeah. I like to think about, to answer your question, the readiness that we as a people had coming out of quote-unquote slavery. You look at 1863 and 1865. Now, if we were, as a boss, I shows be, if we was that, then within 2 years out of slavery, we were, running governments. We were running our areas. We were teachers. We were bankers. That creates a stark difference between us being, the slave, uneducated, and then being these people who ran their own commerce, their own cities, and so on and so on. Yeah. So my point in that is that there's a certain amount of acumen prior to legalization that gets discredited inside of the terminology black market. So let's look at that, for example. Yeah. The ability to transport, to cultivate, and transport, traffic, and move that weed from one place to another is there's a lot of intellectual property inside of that right there. But that all gets invalidated because if you can't get a license, you're a drug dealer. Yeah. 80% of the marijuana that grows in California, I know personally because I used to be the plug. 80% of the marijuana that grows in California leaves California through sophisticated routes that we will not mention right here that arrives everywhere you find it, right? So I think I mentioned to you, it's my son's here, so he has to help me with this history. As Baron Rothschild at the Battle of Waterloo, right? He made a statement that we've all kind of become familiar with. It says that when there's blood in the streets, buy. Everyone heard that before?
We was talking last week.
But that's a truncated statement. The real statement, the fullness of it is that when there's blood in the streets, buy, even if it's your own. Now, when you think about that, that's some critical thinking. Because instead of getting all caught up in the emotionalism, which a lot of us are talking about, this marijuana legalization aspect, we're caught up in the emotional side of it. But what we really should be checking is that if we are 5 times more likely to be arrested with weed, it's because we got the weed. You see what I'm saying? So as a businessman, when we turn that around, we realize that 80% of the marijuana grown in California
is moving out of there.
And the fact that everywhere we get arrested with weed means we are the transporters of this product. So we keep operating in this industry as though we're just the guys on the corner selling nickels and dime bags, but that's not really what we are. So the legalization movement in actuality is gentrifying our sophisticated routes and our sophisticated pockets of where we actually moved, marijuana.
Yeah, yeah. And, we spoke about that, about whether or not we feel legalization is a good thing. What is that doing to the black market? Well, what is that doing to the legacy market?
There you go.
Where people are already
that happens to be black.
Where people already had these things set up, and we already had these transport routes set up, and now you're dealing with a situation where now it will be government regulated and government approved, which erases, like you said, the legacy market of that. So when you look at a topic like legalization, do you feel like that is a positive for where we're going as far as with cannabis and as far as the ability to actually monetize it?
I think it's like most everything that's been introduced by people outside of our culture. It's I think the Native American said it best: the white man speaks with a forked tongue. So I think it has its good and it has its bad, and everything as it affects us. When we don't take a proactive position, it will always affect us bad.
Yeah.
I was at a conference just recently with the sister who introduced me to you, Roz McCarthy of Minorities for Medical Marijuana.
Yeah.
Oh, and shout out to the Atlanta Hip House. They're
Oh,
here
Hip House,
too.
yeah. Shout out to them boys. That was Zoom.
So she introduced me to you, and she was making a statement about legalization and how it's moving. At that particular conference, I noticed that where they were talking about legalization was light years from where we're talking about it. We're still talking about it from the position of being arrested or not arrested, or
where they're having conversations about literally making the money.
I mean, it's about building homes on the moon with marijuana or something, and we're just still talking about, can I not go to jail, or can you erase my record?
And there's so much about the stories that we allow ourselves to be part of, and I often speak about the importance of media when it comes to leaving some of these stories behind. Saying that you're constantly the person being arrested, that you're constantly the person in a pinch when it comes to bud. Start making these shows and stories where it comes off like we just use it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like every other race, like you just happen to use it. It's not something you need in order to survive for the rest of your life. You just happen to be a user.
Yeah, that's my issue with being honest with you and transparent. Like, as I see the way that hip hop interacts with cannabis, with marijuana, is that we still operate as the Sambos as it relates to marijuana. It's always about how knocked out, how blowed I am, and so on and so on. Yeah. Even the concept of, is it the gas or is it loud? When we would be buying from the white boys, they were talking about genetics and the strands and so on. But our thing was, is it gas? Is it loud? Because we didn't want to know the intelligence around it. And I think, like you mentioned, when they began to use terminology like medicinal
versus
just how high it gets you, then it kind of moves us out of the framework that, that ain't what we into. Mm-hmm. Not knowing that, individuals, whether they consume it for whatever reason, it still has medicinal effects,
Yeah. One of the things I do like about ReUp is that you take advantage of the Jobs Act. You take advantage of the Jobs Act. What made you think about the Jobs Act and how that could actually impact the cannabis industry as far as bringing in wealth and helping people create wealth?
Well, as a historian, I'm aware of that, and my father was a Garveyite. So I'm aware that Marcus Garvey raised millions, by pennies and dollars. And I know how impactful Marcus Garvey was and should have been, had we had a different type of history. Yeah. And so with that, President Obama did a very powerful thing of, regardless of what your position is on that political position. Mm-hmm. In 2012, President Obama created the Jobs Act. And prior to that, 79 years before that, private enterprises could not raise monies directly to the proletariat. And so translation is that if you were not an accredited investor, you were not considered sophisticated, meaning that if you were not worth $1 million and earned $250,000, you could not invest. For example, if you had $25,000 just 7 or 8 years ago and invested in Spotify, Airbnb, or Uber, you would have made $35,000, $50 and $75 million today. But we don't get those opportunities because they're not looking for the non-accredited investor. So we thought to use the Jobs Act, which allowed the non-accredited investor, meaning that you were worth less than the $1 million and you made less than the $250 a year. We thought to leverage that into the cannabis area so that we could begin to pool everybody's money together and put that money together, and then we'd actually have the ability to be an IPO, and we could make that investment into cannabis. Yeah. And so that's what ReUp is. And I think one of the, if I must say, one of the more powerful aspects of ReUp is that we fractionalize the concept or the asset of legal cannabis. And what I mean by that is that when you fractionalize an asset or an investment, you make it affordable, whereas by ourselves we could not have afforded it. You see? Man. So then everybody owns a piece of that shopping mall.
Yep.
And so now we all earn money back on that. This thing is going to be $1 trillion industry when we diversify the face of the ownership.
And that's what I love about how you also speak about, because you're actually bringing up a topic that we need to really, really get into, which is building community within community. And everybody just kind of chipping in a little bit to get to a certain point. Mm-hmm. That's almost a mentality you have to change from people, because even as we sit right now through technology, through a lot of things, we're really individualists. Everybody's trying to figure out how to way to make themselves a boss, trying to make themselves a CEO versus saying, how can we collectively do this and get and be able to do something on a larger scale? So that's another way where I totally support ReUp. I also support you from the fact that you boast how you could connect people with legal resources and as well as business resources, which is something that, again, we often lack when it comes to mentors and people to be able to kind of walk you through that. Who are some of the people that you are able to connect people who would be interested in ReUp with, like when it comes on the legal side, when it comes to the business side, when it comes to helping them with their business?
Well, let me explain that a little bit.
Sure.
I have dental offices here in Atlanta, mm-hmm. all right? And so there's a concept in the dental world called a DSO. And the DSO is a dental service organization where in Atlanta, in Georgia, right? In Georgia, you have to be a dentist to own a dental office. But a DSO in other places, what they do is that they connect with the dentist and they bring money and they bring management experience and that whole back office support, so that the dentist can only focus on clinical. So I borrowed from that model, and we coined a phrase called the CMO, the Cannabis Management Organization, where prior to legalization, you grew weed, you sold weed. That was the depth of your business model.
Yeah.
All right. So you made an edible, you ate it. So the CMO, the way we function, is that now with legalization, to remain compliant, to stay in the guidelines, you need a level of management, and of course you need the funding.
Yeah.
I participated in 2 social equity programs in Oakland and San Francisco and LA. And both of those equity programs, which is affirmative action licenses, those licenses were awarded to us because of, quote unquote, we were living in areas hit hardest by the war on drugs. So, which I don't know what area where we live did not, but anyway, that's another story. So they gave licenses. And out of, I think, maybe like 39 licenses, none of them but one opened up because we just didn't have the money. It's an empty program. They give you the license, so you get it, and you can't do anything with it because you can't afford
to maintain it.
So the purpose of ReUp is that we bring the money to that person and that support, because the average dispensary is closing within 1 year to 3 years, even if it has enough funding. So that's what our program. We bring that level of support to someone who has gotten an affirmative action license or just a license. We bring that support. We negotiate the leases, the legal, the equipment, and the management side, the back office side, so that person who grows, that person who extracts, can focus on what they're doing.
Which is a needed thing. I had mentioned to you when we spoke last week about my friend Albie Montgomery, who was a guest on the show. He has a license in Massachusetts, and we were talking about not selling it. We called it not selling grandma's house. And how people are kind of quick to do that right now. Like, you'll have this license, but you don't necessarily have the funds to restore a building. You know what I'm saying? Make that compliant. Go get the work, all that other stuff. You had to spend all the bread to just get the license in itself. You know what I mean? And that puts a lot of people, like you mentioned, in a bad predicament to where before you know it, they just sell the whole license. And now you have people in these communities that have been hit the hardest by the war on drugs being occupied by people who had nothing to do with it.
And if I can add to that, there's a concept now. When you get that license, you can literally sell that license to the advantaged communities at the same price that you got it for. So it's just it's not cool.
No, it's not cool. Man.
Yeah, it's a secondary asset that's being sold like an aftermarket part. A whole license that's worth millions of dollars, legacy money for you and your family, and generational wealth being sold for nothing.
You know, we talk about wealth a lot, black wealth. In your opinion, what is black wealth? Like, what would you describe that as?
I'll answer it like how my father taught me, and I teach my children that it's the ability to control your time. My father imparted to me that you should make sure you can afford time. If you can't buy time, then you can't make proper decisions.
Yeah.
The decisions that hold us back was done by individuals who could afford time. That's nobody's running to clock in nowhere or on lunch break.
Yeah.
Whenever I've been anywhere speaking, I've noticed that a lot of the conversations that take place, it's done by professors, and they're on college break. It's the summer, or it's the spring break, but the plight of black people is really being dealt with by individuals who are moonlighting, who don't have the time to really sit back and think. The decision to create legalization and then later on create social equity was done by individuals who weren't clocking in.
Who had time.
They had time.
They had the time.
They could
to
afford
do it.
time. They bought time. And they used time to take time.
Yes.
So I think wealth is the ability to afford time.
Yeah. Well, I feel like, and you're right. Wealth is the ability to afford time. You also be able to afford something twice. You know what I'm saying? Like, you also should be able to do that.
Right.
When we're looking into the cannabis space, I know a lot of people speak often about how they want to have a dispensary. They want to have their own strain of weed. And I think that's all well and good. But I'm watching people now come into the industry from where they were. They're taking their career and they're translating into something else.
Right.
Like even yourself from real estate, coming into this space. And I want to speak to you about that, like the importance of people realizing that, especially when speaking about real estate, you owning a property in one of these areas that's targeted, that's quote unquote affected the most by the war on drugs. That's another thing that you might not want to let go if you own that. You know what I mean? Yeah, because you never know what it could turn into. I think that you speak a little bit about that, about how we don't look at markets such as real estate from that perspective. You know what I'm saying? Rather than look at it from a flip or flop perspective, look at it as this could actually develop out into something totally different.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I 2 months ago, I was in Denver, Colorado.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity to see an article on Boulder, Colorado. And they pointed out that since legalization, I think the price was that the value of real estate had risen 400%. And so that's what's taking place, because the individuals who are moving in to work in the industry, the properties necessary to grow indoor or whatever associated with it, it's driving the value up. So again, when there's blood in the streets, you buy, even when it's your own
blood. Yeah, man. Another thing I like to speak about, and we spoke about it last week, was the importance of media in this space right now when it comes to telling these stories and controlling the narrative and changing the face of who is important and who is somebody in the cannabis space. How do you feel how important do you feel like podcasts, blogs, TV shows, et cetera, are when it comes to monetizing our own culture?
I think more now than ever, we need to have the ability to consensus build faster. Like I'm a vegan, right? So I think the reason why people still drink, cow's milk is because we don't consensus build as fast as other cultures. So what I mean by that is that we should not still be deliberating on that. That should not be a thing where we're discussing, I like the way it tastes. That's not even the conversation about, are we designed to consume a certain thing? So I think our inability to consensus build is as a result of us not having media. I mean, I've seen people on, shows that I won't call, which is why I appreciate you. People have been on the show for leaking a dick pic. and you get primetime media as a result of that. Yeah. And so, I mean, like what? So I really appreciate you being you and doing what you do, because we need to curate this experience and we need to give voice to it so that we can consensus build faster and explore this concept, because what's going to happen is what always happens. This person is going to turn this thing from a boom to a bubble, and then it's going to be a bust. And it will have nothing to do with the way that weed is traditionally sold and purchased and consumed. And then everyone will be turned off, and many of us would still be at the stage of calling it dope and staying away from it, as opposed to the ability for us to earn and create legacy wealth. So I'm grateful for you, and I think that more of our media needs to step it up and conduct, a higher platform, a higher level of conversation.
High level of conversation, please. Yes, sir.
Pun intended.
What can we expect from ReUp over the next year? 2020 is going to open up a lot. We're already seeing it open up in Georgia. They finally let it be known who the people who are going to actually issue out these licenses in Georgia. Mm-hmm. So by the time January 1st hits, people are going to be on go. Trying to see where they can get their foot in this industry. You're already there with ReUp. What's ReUp looking like in 2020? Like, what are your plans for 2020?
Well, we're still working, from a humble position of establishing ourselves as thought leaders in the space, as being able to fractionalize the asset of legal cannabis, legal marijuana. So expect us to have established ourselves as thought leaders and brought along more of us into that space. Yeah. And then we'll be doing a major capital raise that's nationally, because our plan is in at least 10 U.S. cities to establish 10,000 people. 10,000 people who give $5,000 each is $50 million. Yeah. And that would be our capital raise going forward.
And that sounds like a large number, but it's really not. I make a joke every year, especially during local elections, that the people who go to a compound on Sunday can elect a whole council person. You know what I'm saying? If you actually put it in context. Like
that night.
Yeah, that night. The people who walked in there, that number of people, if they would have walked into a voting booth, you could have got somebody elected.
Wow.
So think about it, like 5,000 sounds like a lot, but really it's about where you want to put your time and what you want to do. Mm-hmm. Is it going to be a weekend thing, or is it going to be something where you're trying to really build like a wealth thing?
Right.
So it's really about putting your time in place and where you want to go.
It's true. And that's again why, I'm grateful for your program, because that's it's your content is much more than what we thought having a conversation about marijuana would be.
I appreciate that.
It should be smoke filled and Cheech and Chong ish right now, but I appreciate that, because that's what's gonna move the pendulum.
Now, I appreciate you, man, for coming through tonight. Mm-hmm. And before we fade out, because I feel Scott Lee's almost done cooking. People are lined up already. I know they want to eat. When it's all said and done, what do you want to be remembered for the most?
For remembering. Yeah. I want to be remembered for someone who remembered and didn't forget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we need a lot more of you, man. Remember, give us all the memories. Remind us about Marcus Garvey. Remind us of things like, remind us of the Black Star Movement. Remind us of things that actually happened, because all those things right now are very needed in the space we're at.
Very relevant right now.
Yeah, you could wake up one day and be and really be behind the 8 ball in something that you should have been ahead of it.
Yeah, so I think I'm very proud of ReUp, and you can find us at letsreup.com.
Yes.
And I'm very proud of it, because I think it's an opportunity for all the individuals who did quote unquote wrong to fix something and make it right. And it's like for the brothers who ain't. It's like pouring out something for the brothers and the sisters who ain't here. Yeah. So I think that the zeitgeist is that we're ready. We watched how we responded to the film Black Panther. You look on TV, we're everywhere now. Yeah. So the zeitgeist is real, and I'm hopeful that will respond for real this time.
Oh, brother, I feel the same, because when you talk about the zeitgeist being real, I felt Tyler Perry's speech empowered a lot of people and reminded a lot of people that there's a time and place, man, and sometimes you got to stop asking for a seat at the table and just remind yourself you can go buy a table. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't necessarily, you could do all that. You don't necessarily need this to expand. So I appreciate you for coming through, my brother, man.
Problem,
Definitely.
Man.
and helping us end the year properly. Give it up for my man Melek Dexter,
right.
please. Yeah. And that's Cash Color Cannabis, a high level of conversation. Again, hashtag Cash Color Cannabis, hashtag Scotch Yard Dinner Series. And we out for the year.
All right.
All right.